This week, Tesla dropped several bombshells during the Q4 earnings call. If you're a car company and you don't have full self-driving, you're dead.
Plus, Tesla headquarters looks like a dystopian movie set. It's got driverless cars. It's got a secret tunnel. Births out of this tunnel into the other side.
It's pretty fun. And a leading EV state is on the brink of banning Tesla sales and service centers. All that and more starts right now. So this year, we have a goal of doubling our subscriber count. We get about 1 million of you guys watching every single month, but not all of you guys are subscribed. All you have to do is just click that subscribe button. It really goes a long way, helps us out. And you can also listen to this podcast on any platform out there right now. We're being featured inside all of your Teslas on TuneIn. You just go to TuneIn.
The browse tab right there, and it's one of the top. Yeah.
All right. So let's go ahead and just get right into it right now with Q4 earnings call, because there was a lot to mention, a lot to dive into.
A lot came from it, yes. And a couple of bombshells that, as usual, come from these earnings calls. And Elon's generally been getting better at not dropping too much insight, but this one, we did get some good insight.
I felt like he was very blunt and honest with a lot of things. Like starting out with full self-driving, he pretty much said, if you're a car company and you don't have full self-driving, you're dead.
And he actually talked about unsupervised full self-driving being something that is going to begin to roll out in Austin, Texas as of June 2025. So just a few months out here.
Right now, there's also been some images of these unsupervised Teslas driving around the lot there in Texas. It's kind of crazy to watch it. Like
these are newly built cars. Exactly. These are cars that are coming just off the line. They announced this earlier in the week, and this is supposedly going to be coming out to Austin as well. But this is in Fremont, and they're going into a logistics lot. Essentially, what this is allowing Tesla to do is reduce labor costs, really improve the efficiency of being able to get these out to the prospective buyers. But you may recall back in December, they started painting portions of the floor there in this parking lot at Fremont. And now the Teslas are actually utilizing that and going to these spots to get themselves ready for delivery, to be put on a truck, I guess, and go for delivery.
All right. So in terms of timeline, he gave us the timeline here. So we're looking at Austin, Texas is where this is first going to happen. Yeah. And then California will get unsupervised full self-driving.
And what we mean by that is that, of course, the car gets to be, you don't have to pay attention. It goes into level 3 full self-driving, which right now we're in level 2. There's a pretty significant jump when it comes to level 3 and not having to be engaged as a driver. And this is what he says will begin to happen as a paid service out of Austin in June.
So paid service, when he's saying that, he's talking robotaxi. Like he's saying the Tesla fleet of their cars, not necessarily your cars out there making money, is going to be Tesla's cars as robotaxis. Because it gets kind of confusing with all the different verbiage. And then once we get past that moment of Tesla's fleet of robotaxis, which will be something kind of like Waymo,
which will be available to the public. Exactly. If you're in Austin, you can hail it. You'll pay for it. It'll go to Tesla directly. And I imagine it's either robotaxis or some new Teslas that are rolling up to you with no drivers.
Yes.
That are able to give you rides.
I think it's really interesting, too, when you look at the different levels of full self-driving, because Mercedes already has level 3 autonomy. Now, there are a lot of restrictions with it. I think it can only go to 40 miles an hour, and it has to be in certain areas. But with Tesla, when we're looking at level 3 autonomy, essentially, because it's this vision-based system, it's not mapped roads, it will be able to drive anywhere.
Yeah, that's the understanding, right? So the Mercedes ProPilot, I believe it's called, is under 40 miles an hour. It's in Nevada, I believe Nevada only right now in the United States, maybe California as well.
I think it was
California and Nevada, okay. And then that's mapped roads, very confined environment, but you are allowed to take your eyes off the road. And Mercedes actually, it takes liability for those scenarios where the car is engaged under that scenario of 40 miles an hour or less in these specific roads. So if something happens, it's on Mercedes, not on you. And that's the only automaker that's allowing this, but very restrictive because it is geofenced. Teslas will not be geofenced.
And you can't just also the other thing I wanted to say about all this is you can't just bring your cars to Austin, like we said.
Yeah.
You can't drive there and be like, okay, I want my car to be part of robotaxi, or I'm going to buy a new Tesla and just leave it in Austin. Again, this is Tesla's fleet that they own, that they're doing this with to try it out at first. Because as Elon said, any headlines, any accidents, especially in full self-driving, are going to get the headlines, going to go crazy. And the safety is the top priority.
40,000 people die in accidents every single year, rarely makes headlines on a global scale. This is going to make headlines. And unfortunately, it is going to happen. probably going to happen this year if this scales up, but the numbers will be significantly less when you compare it to how many miles these vehicles will cover before that happens. But of course, the headlines will be there to pick it up right when it does.
Now, what I thought was one of the most interesting things that he said during this entire earnings call was about hardware 3 versus hardware 4.
That's right. Hardware 3 will need to be swapped now. So this is something that when you spoke to Lars over at the Robotaxi event, he confirmed that this was something that you possibly could get away with and still get full self-driving on hardware 3.
I mean, even last week we said that Elon had just said hardware 3 wasn't dead.
Yeah.
And he's not necessarily saying it's dead, but he's saying that it needs to be reworked or something else needs to be added to it.
It's reaching its maximum potential. It's pretty capable. This latest update really gave it quite a bit of capability. But long term, for full hands-off, sit in the back, fall asleep sort of approach, it needs to go hardware 4. And Tesla is willing to do that for free for everyone who's purchased full self-driving with these older vehicles. He said it's going to cost a lot of money for Tesla, but fortunately for Tesla, not that many people committed to buying full self-driving over the years. So they don't have to pay too much out of pocket to cover these expenses.
So we had full self-driving in our Model 3, which is no longer with us. So we don't have to worry about that. But I know there are a lot of people out there that did buy it and they planned on, having this full autonomy. So it's nice that they're doing that. But then I also think about other vehicles where they're like, well, I don't own full self-driving, but I lease it. And I like to lease it here and there. Will they be willing to upgrade those to hardware 4? So here's my concern. Our Model X, we intermittently use full self-driving. We don't own it, but sometimes we buy it when we need it for a road trip. Now, would Tesla upgrade those hardware 3?
I would imagine you as the owner of the Model X would have to be willing to pay to upgrade to hardware 4 because hardware 3 is not purchased in our Model X. So in those scenarios, yes, you can't just, you can use full self-driving, obviously, but not to the capability long-term that he just suggested in this earnings call.
So it would only be for those who have actually purchased full self-driving, not for those that lease it?
Yeah. And we don't lease ours, I guess that's the other thing. So if you lease it and you've paid for it, that I don't know.
There's a lot of questions there, right?
The gray areas, I'm sure, are just starting with this particular subject. Yeah. Which is self-driving in general.
Now, in a second, I also want to talk about some of the new products that Elon teased. But when we're talking about switching out your hardware, it also reminds me of today's sponsor.
We open up our smart cars with our phone, so why are we still opening up our house with keys? This is the Level Lock Plus Matter, and it's like the Tesla smart lock. So I'm currently in the process of trying to make my home smarter, so I reached out to Level to try their Level Lock Plus, and they offered to sponsor today's video. I wanted the Level Lock Plus because it's small and it doesn't look like a smart lock. So if you live in a strict HOA like me, it's perfect. It also comes in satin nickel or matte black options, so it can easily blend in with existing hardware. I could even install it myself, and I love the clean, minimal design. I can now use my phone or my watch to open my front door, or you could use any compatible smartphone with the Level app. Best part is it includes Matter, which means you can control it easily with Apple Home, Google Home, Amazon, or Samsung. Also, it comes with the standard key option, NFC key fobs, and works with Bluetooth, so you're always connected. I also installed the Level keypad so we can enter with the key code phone free. Having multiple options like this was super important to me because I also wanted my kids who don't have a phone to be able to unlock the door. And you can also share a code with a guest so you don't have to hide a physical key under the doormat. You can simply create a pass to share, and I can track activity to see who's come and gone in my home. So if I'm traveling for content and need to let a neighbor or family member into my home, it's safe and easy. Level is also offering my viewers a promo code of 15% off orders over $200. I'll link everything you need to know down in the description below, and let's get back to the video.
And Kim, a lot of other headlines came from the earnings report. This particular one was about the Model Y. Of course, right now it's February. Every single Model Y that has already been pre-ordered, production begins right now in February across all factories around the world. So deliveries beginning in March. You kind of see they're all getting going right now.
Yeah, it looked like all production is really going towards the Model Y. So it did sound like it might affect production in some of the other vehicles.
And other models.
I also love seeing how they're able to ramp it up. It's a long ways from the old days when he was sleeping on the factory floor. And it does seem like this new refresh Model Y is selling like hotcakes right now, especially in China.
Yeah, over 70,000 pre-orders in the first 5 days as it was available. This was a report from Chinese news outlet Yikai, who used an R&D source from Tesla China specifically, that revealed that over 73,000 of these Teslas were pre-ordered in the first 5 days. And what's interesting is you compare that to the first few days of the Model 3 refresh this time last year in China, it's almost twice as many that were pre-ordered for the Model Y. So the interest is really coming hot across that region. And what the source actually revealed, what I thought was really fascinating, was that the Model Y itself is actually the first Tesla that's in part designed in unison with the Tesla China team. Not just the United States design team, but the China design team also had quite a bit of involvement. And they said that the China team actually focused on the interior and the exterior elements of the Y, where the US team actually focused more on the software and other pertinent features. So it was kind of a conjunction of two different parts of the world working to make this the best car they can. And obviously
that's super interesting. I actually didn't realize that, but I can see it selling well. Model Y already is the best selling car in the world. So then for this refresh to be selling well makes sense. And then leaning into the Chinese design team is super interesting. I've seen some shorts going around actually showing, Chinese people talking about their Model Y. And one of the ones I thought was interesting was he said that the Chinese like to use that front trunk for fishing, to store the fish in. And now it has that drain in it so they can drain the water. And all I think about for me being from here is, wow, now your car is going to smell like fish.
Well, the outside, it's not going to come into the cabin.
And I guess it's the front trunk. And that's what I've always said about the front trunk is that you can, that smell doesn't go into the cabin of the car, but still it's just interesting how different parts of the world use it differently. Yeah.
And other new products also hinted at during this earnings call. They said several new products in 2025 will be unveiled. And the first half of 2025 is when we get this affordable Tesla, the Model 2 that we've called it. So that's going to be launched or unveiled here in the first 6 months. So
Robotaxi with a steering wheel.
You think it's Robotaxi with steering wheel? We'll see. We'll see. But yes. And
so do you think that also means Roadster?
Roadster, I think, is part of these products. Yes, I think that comes in Q3, back to October, November, as Tesla likes to do it with these unveils. And this becomes a launch event where some of the initial ones get rolled out. That was described last year.
What other new products could there be? Like, is it going to be something like huge, like Optimus was, or?
I mean, we've heard about a lot of these products. I don't think it's an Optimus launch on this one, and we'll talk about Optimus in a second. But
the van, the passenger van,
Robo van, maybe there's more.
The van.
Maybe there's more insights there, but they did bring up Optimus, and there was a lot of interest. They said it's not design locked in 2025, so they're still working on finalizing this, and a lot of investment, the vast majority of Tesla's investment, I think they suggested, has gone into AI, and Optimus being part of that, $2.4 billion over the last year. And they're focusing on doubling down. Of course, Elon says more than doubling. He said 10xing on how much focus they're putting in on autonomy and AI specifically. And he sees this being the kind of the path for Tesla being the most valuable company in the world long term, moving way away from being a car maker, which a lot of people focus on, and being almost entirely software AI driven, which is what the people that are more in tune with it kind of have noticed over the years. But yes, they said that over 10,000 of these they plan on producing to work internally at Tesla factories to get initial data on, and possibly by 2026, this becomes available. We're talking about Optimus becoming available for some commercial use that's privately, sold off to. So not necessarily coming to our houses in 26, but commercial use.
I wish they would release one that maybe is like the Hardware 3 versus the Hardware 4. Just one that we could have for now just to do laundry and dishes. That's all I want.
Yeah, but you don't want it to go rogue doing laundry and dishes. And it's not
if it could just be programmable for a few different tasks.
Well, they're always programmable until they're not.
No, I don't think that is even going. I don't know, but I want it now. And I feel like I talk to people all the time. They're like, I tried to order it and I can't. And I'm like, yeah, it's not really available. But because they had them at
the Robotaxi unveil, yeah.
I'm like blanking on it. At the Robotaxi. It's hard to remember what that event was actually called because there's so many different products at it.
Going on, yeah.
But because they were there, people think that that's like, that it's ready now. But it wasn't even talking by itself. It was like a puppet. But the hands were really cool. It was able to do a lot of things. And I think it really makes us excited.
It's got a lot of unique elements and parts. Initially there was hints that Tesla's going to begin to use some parts that are used in its rockets or its cars. This particular earnings call, Elon suggested that that was not going to be the case. There just needs to be much more refinement done and specific needs for Optimus. So it had to be custom parts made for it.
Going back to full self-driving, he did talk about licensing full self-driving.
Yes, to multiple manufacturers. Multiple car makers have already reached out, had interest, and he made it very clear that the volume needs to be very high for it to be worth Tesla's time and engineering to be able to make this happen, whether it's the sensor suites on the exterior or just the software Tesla will provide for the interior and just the brain of it. But they are in talks with several automakers in making that license.
Did you notice that he basically told people just to buy a Tesla and reverse engineer it versus like licensing out his full self-driving?
I mean, he's always given the green light to go ahead, do whatever you want, as long as, you can make it for good use and make EVs more adoptable. That's always been his approach. So I don't think he's necessarily concerned of, he's always given the green light. Hey, steer by wire, 800 volts.
Yeah.
All these different things. He's put it out there.
And speaking of software, did you see the interview with RJ Scrinch, who's the CEO of Rivian? And he said that companies are basically knocking on his door for software, that everybody wants good software. But surprisingly, Rivian doesn't have really a full self-driving right now, but they're getting it very soon here.
They're coming in 2025, getting it to level 2. So right now they've got a pretty advanced driver assist setup, whether you have lane centering or you have adaptive cruise control, but they go up to level 2, which a lot of people are surprised to hear that Rivian hasn't had level 2 lane changing and all these things that Tesla's had for so many years and other EVs have had, honestly. But they've got the 11 cameras, they've got the 5 radars, 12 ultrasonics, they've got a front driver-facing camera as well. So the plan is to go full level 2 by sometime this year. So that's, again, hands-free. You're able to steer, accelerate. The car does that by itself. And then level 3 comes in next year where you don't even have to pay attention. So it's taken all of these years. They've been working on the back end. They see the value in it, and it looks like it's going to happen.
Yeah, and one of the things I was looking into how they do their full self-driving as well, and they had the same approach really as Tesla with the vision and the ultrasonic sensors. They're not doing LiDAR. They're not doing mapped roads. So I think it will evolve pretty quickly here. It's pretty cool to see it. Also, Rivian is offering some more discounts to try to get gas owners into their electric vehicles.
Into the R1s, up to $6,000. Last week we talked about some of these incentives that are built in for Rivian to get people to come on board. Now it's specified for gas car owners and hybrid car owners. So all you've got to do is prove that you either lease or own a gas car or a hybrid car. And if you want to get the max tri-motor pack, that actually gets you the discount up to $6,000. There's lesser discounts for lesser trims, but no demo models, they say, and also no used Rivians. They don't qualify. But from now until March 31st, you can get between, I think it's $2,000 to $6,000 off if you prove that you have a gas car or lease and get yourself a new Rivian. Yeah.
The interview is really fascinating, actually. He said a lot of interesting stuff, and he did talk a little bit about like the Chinese tariffs and in terms of like the US and how we could potentially fall behind in terms of EVs with these tariffs. So last week I talked a little bit about like, why can't we have these Chinese cars? Like they're so amazing. They do all this stuff. And I've definitely done a little more research this week when it comes to the tariffs and why we have them. Tesla's actually suing the European Union over tariffs for their Chinese-made EVs.
This is really recent, exactly. And BMW is actually on board with suing the EU as well, and BYD as well, because they have some cars. The Mini Cooper, I think, for example, is built in China that's imported into Europe. And these tariffs are acted in there. It's about 8% for some EVs, like the Model 3 that's built in Shanghai, 8% tariff to come into the EU, and then an additional 10% import duty that's imposed on them. Whereas when it comes to the Mini Cooper or some of these BYDs, up to 35% tariff in addition to the 10% import duty that's added. So Tesla's basically saying, hey, this is not going to allow, and BMW's been on board with this, saying this is not going to allow for EV growth and expansion at a rapid rate that you guys want in the EU if you're constantly putting these tariffs and bringing these in.
But for a lot of people that read this, it seems very hypocritical because you're saying, I don't want these tariffs, these Chinese tariffs on our cars, but it's okay for Chinese-made cars to have the tariffs.
So there was an anti-subsidy investigation that was in place that showed that China had financial support for EVs that were kind of unfairly undercutting the European Union and the automakers in that area. So this is why the EU was like, hey, this is not going to fly in our region of you bringing these in. But this is nothing new, as you said. Canada's got 100% tariff on Chinese-made EVs, and the rebates in Canada for those Chinese-made EVs also are not going to be in place as well.
And one of the viewers last week actually commented that had more to do with the Chinese Communist Party and our involvement with them and not wanting to obviously put our economic funds into that.
Yeah, I mean, the talk was that the Chinese marketplace and the companies there slowly take market share from just about every single industry. We've seen it year over year. And if you let it go long enough, it just essentially bleeds into impacting your country and your economy. And that's really what it is. More so than protecting the automakers or the unions or things of that nature. It's more the Communist Party's involvement and how that plays a role in undercutting other markets. So think Amazon, think Temu, and the impacts that are happening there.
I was going to say that. I feel like if we start with the car companies, we have to think about the bigger picture. We have to think about all the other products that are coming out of China, all the Temu products, the cheap stuff on Amazon that we're getting. It's all coming from China. And so we are undercutting our own economy by buying those products. So if government is going to do something, they really need to do it as a whole, which stinks because it's going to make it more expensive for us. And while we're on the topic of economy, it's kind of happening here in the US on a smaller scale with Washington State because they're trying to ban Tesla direct sales. And that would also affect the service centers there in Washington State.
Yeah. So if you're in that state, if this bill turns into law, then essentially you don't have a service center. You can't directly buy Teslas there. You travel probably to Oregon to do this, where your sister, for example, in South Carolina is one of those 13 states that doesn't allow for direct sales. So she had to go to Charlotte, North Carolina to pick up her car. And then service centers are also not allowed in these states as well. So it's really interesting because the Northwest and Seattle in particular, that Washington State area, fourth highest EV adoption behind California, Florida, Texas, and then it's Washington. So it is fascinating to see that the Tesla owners there could possibly lose their service centers, their ability to buy EVs at the incredible rate that they're buying them there. If you've been there, it's just as impressive almost as what you see in parts of California where it's just everywhere. Mm-hmm. But the traditional dealerships basically saying they need to protect their business model, and they argue that these direct sales create an unfair competitive advantage for Tesla. And we know local dealerships do contribute quite a bit when it comes to taxation, employment, sales, and just really good for the local economy. This doesn't allow that to happen when it comes to Tesla, and Tesla's kind of unique in Washington State.
So it's interesting to me because I feel like it's sort of what's going on globally, but then also going on within our state where they're focused on their economy there and having the sales in their economy, even though maybe the people that live there want this direct to consumer model that Tesla offers and they own it. They're thinking about, well, the dealerships and, how do we get the money in our state versus the expansion of, moving forward.
Yeah. And Tesla's actually encouraging Washington State residents to actually contact their representatives to try to oppose this bill. So again, it's not gone into law yet, but the plan is that they're going to try to push forward with it. And if it does pass, then it becomes a big problem for a lot of Tesla owners in that area.
Well, and I also just think about Amazon. We know Amazon is also from Seattle, and they've definitely put a lot of brick and mortar businesses out of business. I think it's a matter of pushing forward with, how we run business in our economy and the future of, buying things online and AI and all these different things kind of come into play. And are we going to hold people back, or are we going to move forward? And how are we going to move forward and protect our economy and our businesses and help people out? Or do we just say, okay, we're going to create new jobs for these new businesses? Yeah. It's a bigger discussion, obviously, but we're kind of seeing the ramifications of it all right now.
Yeah, wait till Optimus, goes full scale. Wait till FSD is full scale. I'm sure that's going to disrupt everything you can and can't think of right now.
Speaking of disrupting, Tesla's disrupting the ground underneath its Fremont factory because they've enlisted Boring Company and they have a tunnel that goes underneath the freeway there, kind of like the Las Vegas Loop. And it's basically the birthing tunnel for Cybertrucks.
It is. And, we saw this in the works a couple of months ago. I think our friend of the channel, Joe Techmeyer, had some drone shots of it as it was being developed, or at least at the surface. But underneath it, 1,300-foot tunnel. This is Tesla commissioning the Boring Company there in Austin, to where they're able to now dig a tunnel that takes Cybertrucks from one side of the factory, doesn't have to go on public roads, doesn't have to get on the back of semi-trucks. and comes to the other side of the factory going underneath the freeway. So it really, expedites the process of getting these trucks from one point to another as it readies for delivery after it's been built. So it's a fascinating approach.
And there's like a birthing canal. Well,
it's Cybertruck inspired.
It's Cybertruck inspired. It's actually really cool. There's like images all over the internet. You guys have probably seen it.
There's a light bar on it too. Yeah, it looks just like the Cybertruck as the Cybertruck births out of this tunnel onto the other side.
It's pretty fun. It's pretty fun for sure. And speaking of the Cybertruck, it can now charge up to 325 kilowatts on the V4 superchargers.
This is all across North America. All V4 superchargers, whether it's Canada or the United States, you can pull up, and the Cybertruck now gets that 325 kilowatt speed. That in about 10 minutes gets you about 100 miles of range. So it goes from about 8 to 40%, which is the fastest Tesla charging you can have right now. Of course, Cybertruck is built on 800 volt architecture, so that helps their cause here. But again, on V3, it doesn't quite get that fast. I believe it's still in the 250s, but once you get to V4, the newest chargers, you are going to get 325
I think
kilowatts.
That's a big deal too. And we know in the past with these V4 superchargers, they had V3 cabinets. So it looks like they finally upgraded these cabinets. And then speaking of fast charging speeds, we have to talk about Lucid Gravity.
Yes. So, we know this has a massive battery pack, right? 123 or so kilowatt hours. It can now, as of February 1st, it can now charge at Tesla superchargers. The Gravity pulls up, and it can charge faster than any Tesla there, which is really what's fascinating. The Gravity has a 926 volt architecture, 123 kilowatt hour battery pack, and it's actually the first non-Tesla to natively have the NACS charging port right there on the back driver's side. So it's able to pull up and charge. I believe the rate is something like 200 miles in 12 minutes. Compare that to Cybertruck's 100 miles in 10 minutes. So the peak charging rate gets up to about 400 kilowatts on this one at V4 superchargers, but at V3, it's similar to Tesla's.
And I imagine it would maintain these charging speeds because it is such a big battery and you have such big, range with it.
Yeah.
And you think about EVs, when you have a low state of charge, they charge faster, but with something like this,
it charges faster a bit longer for sure. Yeah. If you're pulling up at the Tesla superchargers with, 10, 20% state of charge on a Gravity, you're going to be pulling 400 kilowatts for a while. Yeah.
I am dying to try this one out. And as we're closing it up, it looks like Audi is also closing up the Q8 Etron. Yeah. They have canceled production. They're closing down their plant in Brussels.
This is a big deal because I think the Brussels plant has actually produced something like 8 million cars. It's been there since 1948. They're closing down the plant entirely, and they're saying that they're not removing the Etron Q8 production elsewhere. So they're just discontinuing it. The price was too high to produce. Demand was too low, and they're done with it. But as a result of this, 3,000 employees are going to be losing their jobs as well at the Brussels plant, which again was kind of a pretty influential plant that has been building Audis, Volkswagen for many, many years. And to the tune of millions of them.
So are they still going to be producing their other EVs?
That's their focus, exactly. So they are producing EVs. They're not moving on from EVs, but it's the Q8 particularly that was just too expensive and didn't have enough demand that's being removed from their lineup.
All right. So how do you guys feel about that? Do you miss it, or did you not even realize it was an option? I don't know. Apparently it wasn't selling. But thank you guys so much for tuning in with us. And hopefully you've enjoyed watching us or listening to us, and help us reach our goals by subscribing to our channel. And if you want to support us even more, you can take that a step farther by becoming a Patreon.
Yeah, Patreon, you get exclusive access to content, never before seen footage, early release of this podcast, on-air shout-outs, and you also get questions. We have a few people lining up here that'll be asking questions in the coming weeks.
All right. Thank you guys so much, and we'll catch you next time.